Hello, I'm John Mercer. In February, Dorothy and Rush Bedford and I took a scouting trip to Ecuador to see if it would be appropriate for our club's 115th anniversary trip. It is. So we booked 6 rooms and have room for 10 people, with the potential, if we have more than that, to run 2 groups. We have booked our trip through Hoco Tours, an Ecuadorian group, which is a sister organization to the Hoco Toco Conservation Fund. The Hoco Toco Foundation is similar to our Nature Conservancy, but is using ecotourism to support their goals of preserving land for endangered species of birds. It was founded in 1998 with one preserve to help protect the Hoco Toco ant pitta, and has been expanding ever since. They now have expanded to 18 preserves, including the Galapagos Islands, which we will not visit. By booking through Hoco Tours, we are supporting this cause. Any quote unquote profits that they realize from our trip goes back into the cause rather than into someone's pocket. So if you cannot go with us or want to visit other parts of Ecuador, please book through Hoco Tours. This is the area we covered, so there's a whole lot more of Ecuador to explore with Hoco Tours. We already booked our guide for the trip, and he was amazing. Here's Jorge. He's setting up our lunch for this day. He's unbelievable. He knows the calls of every bird and can ID them with the shortest glance. As we were eating lunch, looking out at this view, Jorge, with his great eyes, saw an eagle in a tree. Can you find it? This is it via the telescope at about 20 power. Does that help? How about this? The arrow was pointing to the bird. How he saw it, I will never know. It didn't fly in, it was just sitting there. Jorge kept videoing the bird through his scope, and one of the videos caught this. That was a roadside hawk coming in to harass the eagle. Now that you've met the tour company, I would like to start this pitch with some negatives of why you might not want to go. If you don't like birding in the rain, don't go. We are in the cloud forest most of the time, and it rains almost every day. You've heard the saying, April showers bring May flowers. Well, daily showers bring hummingbird flowers. We will be at high altitudes most of the time. Quito is the second highest country capital in the world, and we spend most of our time above 2,000 meters, which is 6,500 feet or 1.5 miles high. One of the high spots is this pass between the Western Andes and the Eastern Andes. The sign shows 4,063 meters, which is 13,330 feet or 2.5 miles high. At Etnisana, we are walking around at 3,850 meters, which is 12,600 feet or 2.4 miles high. The air is thin and you run the risk of high altitude sickness. And as a matter of fact, they suggest you bring medicine with you just in case. The bathrooms might be an issue. You may wonder, it looks nice. Well, they all were. And note the trash can location. In Ecuador, you must not throw the toilet paper in the toilet. It must go into the trash can. Their septic systems cannot handle paper. This can be a difficult thing to get used to, but they do empty the cans daily, so it really isn't noticeable. Another issue with the bathrooms, especially for the ladies, is that there are no hair dryers and no washcloths provided. Because of the altitude, the temperature is fairly stable, so there is no air conditioning or heaters in most rooms. However, the temperatures were in the upper 50s to low 60s most days, so Wango Lodge gave us hot water bottles to keep us warm at night. Everywhere else, I had to learn to wear my socks to bed. On a couple of days, we did do some steep trails and some longer walks. On 2 days, we put in about 4.2 miles, but the most common distance in a day was about 2.6 miles. Some days higher, some lower. At several lodges, because the trails are muddy or because you need to cross streams, they give you boots to wear. My phone measures flights climbed. On one trip, we ranged from 3 floors to 75 floors. One day, we did 71 floors in a distance of 2.5 miles. A bit of a haul. Generally, over the trip, we averaged about 10 to 20 floors, which is similar to what I do around the house. Drinks like alcohol and even sodas cost extra. It's generally $5 for beer and sodas. This bottle of wine was $27. The first lodge was brand new, and to protect their floors, they gave us slippers to wear in the rooms. If you can't deal with that, you may want to stay home. No problem for me. I take my shoes off when I get home anyhow. You may have to let your belt out one notch by the time you get home. Oh, wait, maybe that starts the positive. The food. The food was first rate. You felt like you were in fancy restaurants. Here's a sample of some of the breakfasts. On the top row, every lodge had a breakfast bar with cheeses, fruit, bread for toasting, yogurt, granola, juice, coffee, and tea. After you pigged out on that, they gave you a meal, eggs or omelets. You can see in the lower right a sample travel breakfast, papaya, toast and jam, passion fruit, a rice and cheese tortilla, and juice. The bun on the top right was only one part of a travel breakfast. It was like a donut filled with sliced sugar cane and sugar syrup. Yummy. Lunches is their main meal, often starting with soup, followed by meat, salad, rice, or other sides. Even the packed lunch, upper center and upper right, were packed with things like pork chops with plantains or a hamburger on bread, salad, chips, and beans. Because lunch is their main meal in Ecuador, but dinner is the main meal in the US, we ended up with two main meals every day, starting with interesting soups, not just tomato and celery, but also soups like quinoa and artichoke, followed by meat, vegetables, and a side. The meals are family style in that everyone gets the same thing. However, they were all excellent at working around mine and Dorothy's various restrictions, sometimes making a special meal for that one person. The lodges were terrific. We stayed 4 nights at Guayacapi, 2 at Guango, and 3 at Rio Huios. We will be in the same lodges, but we'll have one more lodge added and only get 1 night at Guango because they were already selling out, and we didn't have enough rooms for us for both nights. If the new lodge is anything like these 3, it'll be terrific. This shows the front entrance at Guayacapi Lodge with a water jug for everyone to fill their water bottles. The restaurant from the deck at Guayacapi. The view looking out from the deck at the feeders. The arrow points to the banana bar for the other birds. Everyone has them. At Guayacapi, they're so focused on getting the birds, they fill the banana feeders every 20 minutes, 365 days a year, even if nobody is there. This is a new place, and to acclimate the birds to the feeders, they originally started them down the hill and slowly worked them up towards the building to their present locations. These people were serious about getting us birds. My bedroom, a large queen bed and a beautiful view. Note the shiny floors. The place is less than a year old, and they're really trying to keep the floors looking new by banning shoes inside the room. A view from the lodge, front of Guango Lodge and Jorge. Guango was the oldest lodge we stayed in, but it really was really beautiful. The seating area looking into the restaurant. Upstairs seating area. I was really impressed by the arched hallways with stone walls that were maybe a foot thick and beautiful woodwork. I had a single room, so I had 2 twin beds and beautiful woodwork. Dorothy and Rush stayed in one of these cabins, which were much newer than the new main building where I was. The staff was so good to us that one evening, our dessert was a birthday cake for Dorothy, and the staff all came out and sang happy birthday to her. All of the lodges have a white screen, which is like a sheet with a light shining on it. This was to attract moths, which attracted many kinds of birds that you'd never see at any other kind of feeder. The outside of the main building at Rio Huios Eco Lodge. The man by the arrow is taking a picture of the welcoming staff that unfortunately moved before I could get my picture. But here he is. He moved up into a tree. This is a masked trogon. It was sitting on the railing of the deck when we walked up, but I was not prepared to take a picture. Inside the restaurant, always a nice setting. Again at Rio Cuias Lodge, beautiful wood and 2 double beds. On the porches, hammocks were hung for us to use and enjoy the view, but we really didn't have time to enjoy that. Plus, it was a little cool. Another reason to go were the birding locations that Jorge took us to, like Yanacocha Reserve, a Hokotoco property. A short walk took us to a hide. I call these things hides. I don't know what else to call them. Most sites we have visited had a place to get out of the sun or the rain, mostly rain in our case. You sit under the roof and watch the birds come to the hummingbird and butte banana feeders. Here, with a short walk, we got our first ant pittas, the tawny ant pitta. Another hide to sit and wait for birds to come in, this one in Senduro Fruit Tour. Often we sat for several hours, and when the time is done, you've collected 30 to 50 species, most of them new. Here we got great ant shrike. Reserve Amagusa, another stop, another altitude, so more new birds. Here we got rose-faced parrot and orange-breasted fruit eater. We ate lunch at this setting where golden-collared honey creepers visited the banana bar, put on quite a show. I really enjoyed places like this. It is somebody's yard, basically. The owner and his wife set up this hide with local flowering plants and feeders. When visitors get there, they go out, fill the banana feeders, whistle, and the birds come in. We visited several of these mom and pop locations. Sometimes if they become popular, the family can make their living just by charging visitors $10 to sit and enjoy their birds. At Sacha Gusa, we got green honey creepers and 4 new tanager species. Refugio Posset is the world famous. This is the place where we got 4 ant pittas, an ant thrush, and the cock of the rocks, for which we had to get up early to be in the hide before daylight. They had nice sitting area, but we had to drive and then walk down the hills to see the ant pittas. We did not go into the Cambacoca National Park, but parked just outside the entrance to get this high altitude birds like the blue-black conebill and the lacrymose mountain tanager. We were at 8,740 feet or 1.7 miles high. Choco Andino, where we had green and black fruit eaters and plate-billed mountain toucans. A look at the hide from this angle shows that it almost always included a pretty nice bathroom area. Wire Reserve had a nice seating area, but not tons of bird traffic at the hummingbird feeder. But they had 2 other spots to go to. Up a short hill to a second area, but without feeders. Just this magnificent view and great, albeit distant, birds that we got nowhere else. Birds like macaws and Amazonian umbrella birds. This was our lowest elevation, around 1,200 meters or just about 4,000 feet or 3/4 mile high. The restroom in this location was particularly modern and attractive. This is the place we had lunch where Jorge found the eagle shown earlier. It is another of the Hokotoco properties that we visited on this trip. Casa Anticinilo was our final stop. It was also a Hokotoco property and high up in the Andes Mountains above the tree line in the Paramo at roughly 11 to 12,000 feet or 2.2 miles high. Dorothy had been there before and knew the staff. She was on the top of the world. Unfortunately, by the time we were finished our lunch, the place we wanted to go to were in heavy rain, so we had to slowly make our way back down and go to the airport. The view of the Paramo, the rocks on the left, are the remains of a lava tube. We are on the Antisana volcano. Enough for the sales pitch. Now what you've all been waiting patiently for, the birds. I will show them in roughly taxonomic family orders, some good, some bad, and some great. Still, sit back and enjoy while I cycle through. First ducks, Andean teal, 1,000,000 miles away at our last stop, high in the Andes. A much closer torrent duck at the Guango Lodge, where it is fairly reliable. It likes fast-moving water. We saw them in 3 locations, but here was the best. Moving on to guans and quails, a crested guan sleeping in a tree. A family of sickle-winged guans would visit the feeders at Guayacape. Here's Papa with his blue face. Dark-backed wood quail visiting a corn feeder at Amagusa Preserve. Raptors were fairly scarce, but on a couple of occasions we did get a flyby of a shallow swallowtail kite. Hook-billed kites were also seen, this one sitting on a pole on the side of the road. A very close juvenile broadwing hawk, again, right by the side of the road. Roadside hawks were less common here than in Central America, but we did get to see them several times. An appropriately named black caracara sitting in a tree alongside the road. The white spots you see are not on the bird, they are raindrops. Up in the high Andes, you can find the carunculated caracara. I'd never heard the word carunculated before, but apparently it's referring to the orange fleshy area near the eye, which is a caruncle. Jorge spotted this black-chested buzzard eagle in the mountains. I quickly got out of the car, took one shot, and got lucky. Normally, my camera won't focus on birds flying in front of scenery, but this time it cooperated. Distant looks at Andean condors. Unfortunately, it was raining too hard for us to go to the place where we might have gotten closer looks. The only member of the plover family is southern lapwing. Next, doves and pigeons. Here, an Ecuadorian ground dove at a corn feeder. Band-tailed pigeon, Ecuador's largest pigeon, in a tree along a dirt road to the lodge. Distant looks at scaled pigeons on a treetop. This bird created a stir. The eBird reviewer called it a white-tipped dove, even though that is considered rare for this area. But I had it as a gray-fronted, which was more common. Upon review, the brown iris convinced me the reviewer was correct. Eared doves are very common, but I could not get pictures. I finally asked Jorge to stop along the road so I could get one, but the ears don't show well. Up in the Paramo were black-winged ground doves. Now, parrots and parakeets. This is a maroon-tailed parakeet, a surprisingly big bird for a parakeet. I have other shots of this bird in which the whole bird is shown, but I really like this picture, which shows the rose face of the rose-faced parrot. Parrots were tough to photograph, usually flying by fast or far away. There was a group of bronze-winged parrots in one tree, a distant red-billed parrot that Jorge stopped as we were driving along, and he pulled over. I hopped out, quickly took a shot, and got back in. The smooth-billed Ani is in the cuckoo family. This bird was beside the road, and Jorge stopped for me to take a picture, and the picture came out great. I really didn't even have to get out. I just opened the window, and there it was. Owls. We went out one evening for owls and found this rufescent screech owl. It took quite a long time to call it in, but eventually Jorge saw it come in, and by shining the flashlight on it, I could get just enough light for a shot since my flash would not work. We didn't have to make any effort to go out for owls at Rio Huios Lodge. Every night, the black-banded owl came in and just sat off the deck, attracted by the moss at the white screen. Now, one of the gems of the trip, the hummingbirds. Each location have hummingbirds they specialized in. Here, a mountain velvet breast. A female violet-fronted brilliant. Note the short, slightly curved bill. A male black-tailed train bearer with his long black tail. I originally labeled this as a purple-throated woodstar, but was corrected by the eBird reviewer. The purple-throated has a green belly. This gorget is supposed to be pink, so this light fooled me. It looks purple to me. Woodstars all have a mask on their face. Here, the female white-bellied woodstar. They're fairly small hummingbirds that fly like bumblebees. The gorgeted woodstar is the smallest woodstar, less than 2.5 inches long, and they're really tiny little birds. Sapphire-vented puffleg, in which you can't see either the sapphire vent or the puff legs. The little dot of white behind the eye helps identify it. I love the name for this bird, the shining sunbeam, a brilliant study in browns and oranges with a touch of greens and pinks. Not only are hummingbirds specialized for the specific altitude, but they are also designed for and by specific flowers. The sword-bill hummingbird specializes in long, deep flowers like passion flowers. Interestingly, they must preen themselves with their feet since their bills are too long. A great sapphire wing. What a pretty green color. A buff-winged star frontlet, obviously named for the buff-colored wing patch. The collared inca is very similar between the sexes. In the female, the green is paler and there's no blue on the crown, so maybe this is a female. Coronets have short, very slightly droop curvy bills. This is a buff-tailed coronet. The buffy shoulder tufts are diagnostic. The brown violet ear has that dark patch at the ears, which shows violet in the correct light. Unfortunately, this was not the correct light. They can fan these ears out to make fancy displays. We didn't get to see that, though. An appropriately named white-necked Jacobin. There's only 2 species of Jacobins recognized, and the white-neck is the only Jacobin found in Ecuador. The female does not have the large white patch on her neck. Jacobins have short, slightly curved bills. You can probably see where the green thorntail gets its name, the thin, pointy tail. The thorntails are considered to be uncommon to rare in Ecuador. Black-throated mangoes have a black patch that really goes from the throat to the belly. In the female, the black streak is bordered by white on both sides. You can't see the belly, so you have to believe me, this is a violet-bellied hummingbird. Hermits have curvy bills and patches on their face. This guy hiding here is a bronzy hermit. The bill of the long-billed starthroat is not as curvy as the hermit's, but it certainly is long compared to many of the others. And from this view, you can see how it got its name, starthroat. Green crown brilliant, named for the light shade of green on the forehead. Again, a hermit with the curvy bill and an eye patch, but this one is a green hermit. In her own right, the female violet-tailed sylph is a pretty bird, but her man, wow, check out his tail. That goes from blue to violet at the end. All male sylphs have long tails. The rufous-tailed hummingbird was our most common hummingbird, seen in most of the areas. The orange bill is diagnostic. It is the only hummingbird with an orange bill. Why would they name this bird a velvet purple coronet? Duh. The name fits. Stunning. This bird is considered rare in Ecuador, so I guess we were lucky to get a nice look at it. Empress Brilliant, once called Empress Eugenia's hummingbird. Why Empress Eugenia, who was one of Napoleon's wives, got a hummingbird named after her, I don't know. One of the smallest of the 132 species of hummingbirds in Ecuador, the white-booted rackettail is also one of the cutest, with a long racket tail and fuzzy white boots. I had a lot of trouble identifying this bird. No one knew what it was until Jorge got back and let me know it was a white-booted rackettail female. She looks nothing like the pictures in the app. Maybe because she's soaking wet. A purple bib whitetail shows both his purple bib and his white tail. It's a good thing I took pictures. I could never remember all of these names. The male and female of the Andean emerald species look similar except for the color of the crown. Violet blue for the male, turquoise blue to greenish for the female. It's hard to distinguish from this picture, maybe female. The Tyran metaltail moves elevationally between seasons, sometimes being found as low as 2,000 feet. The greenback hillstar has a slightly curved bill that's not as curvy as this flower, but still fits into the flower. You've already seen the curve of the hermits. Here, a tawny-bellied hermit putting the curve of his bill to good use on this flower. If you look carefully, you can see the shadow of the bill in the flower, a perfect fit. Another type of brilliant, the fawn-breasted brilliant, has a straight black bill. The pinkish violet throat makes this a male. This hummingbird is another that stumped Merlin. The guys at Bird Forum guessed bronzy but weren't sure. Fortunately, yesterday, Jorge was finally free and able to identify it for me as a bronzy ingot. No violet front on the female violet front brilliant, just spots. This was fairly common for the female hummingbirds to be spotted. The male does have a violet front, but it really doesn't show in this picture. The fawn-breasted brilliant has a chin patch and a thin buffy line on the wing edge to help with identification. The sparkling violet ear is around 6 inches, is a fairly large hummingbird and has a large range from Venezuela to Argentina, but a restricted elevation range. Note the size of this bird to the feeder, maybe halfway up. Our last hummingbird for the trip was the giant hummingbird. Look how large it is compared to the feeder, almost all the way to the top. This hummingbird is 9 inches tall. What a monster! The giant hummingbird is the largest hummingbird in the world and fairly plain. They move slightly slower, so it was easier to capture them in flight. The masked trogon was the only trogon species we saw, despite seeing them in 2 places. This was the bird on the railing at the lodge when we arrived, a lovely greeter. Andean motmots were split from the blue crown motmots and nested along the path to the restaurant. They were hard to get pictures of because they are usually in dark places. I was fortunate. One of the workers pointed it out to me as I was heading to my room. This is the nest site, just a hole in the wall about 2 feet off the ground. The male red-headed barbet is appropriately named. What a red! Interestingly, they're mostly silent birds and are considered uncommon in Ecuador. The female is much more subdued, but if you hadn't seen the male, you would think she's stunningly colorful. Although they are active foragers, they can go unnoticed because they will often perch for a long time. The orange-fronted barbet is almost an Ecuadorian endemic. Its range just barely reaches into southern Colombia, always on the west side of the Andes. The toucan barbet is the largest of barbets. It is about 8 inches tall. They are considered uncommon in Ecuador. They are threatened by the bird trade, even though they're quite loud. There are 2 very similar looking toucans, the yellow-throated and the choco. The yellow-throated is part of the chestnut mandibled family with brownish lower mandible and green eye ring. Yep, they look almost alike, but the choco toucan has a black, not brown lower mandible and blue eye ring, and their voice is different. The plate-billed mountain toucan is obviously different, much more colorful. Take careful note of the bill pattern. Look where the red and yellow parts are. The plate bill is the only mountain toucan west of the Andes. If you can remember 3 seconds ago, the bill on this gray-breasted mountain toucan does not have red on the bottom, it is on the top, and there's less yellow up under the eyes. Fortunately, these are found only on the east side of the Andes, making it easier to distinguish between the 2. We ran into a family group and got some really cute pictures. Here, a parent about to feed a grape to the youngster, and then the youngster with a grape. Note the face of the youngster isn't as dark as the parents. The crimson rump toucan is very colorful, so many shades of green. They prefer wet cloud forests, and as you can see, the forest was wet this day. The range of the collared araceli goes from Mexico to the western slopes of the Ecuador. They're very sociable birds, usually in small flocks. You would think this might be a parent feeding a youngster, but it is probably a food fight. The youngsters are much duller than the adults, probably 2 males since the bills are both long and the female's bill is shorter. Now we move to the pycnar or the woodpecker/ovenbird family. The golden olive woodpecker has a wide elevation range, ranging from sea level up to 7,500 feet in Ecuador. The black-cheeked woodpecker has a much smaller range and is found only on the west side of the Andes and north into Panama. After a longish, steep walk, we found this powerful woodpecker on her nest. She eventually came out and gave us some very nice looks. They are closely related to our now extinct ivory-billed woodpecker and have a very narrow range, usually between 5,600 feet to 8,500 feet. The lineated woodpecker has a very large range from Mexico through Brazil and is generally a bird of the lowlands, but can occasionally be found higher. You can probably guess it's related to our pileated woodpecker. We found this smoky brown woodpecker in a vacant lot just outside Mindo that had a variety of great birds, including the choco toucan. The strong-billed woodcreeper is a very large woodcreeper with an extended range from pockets in the mountains of Central America to the northern mountains of South America and into the Amazon basin. The montane woodcreepers was our most commonly seen woodcreeper. It can be found on just about all of the white screens we visited. It is smaller than the strong-billed. The spotted woodcreeper is fairly large. Like all of this type of bird, without woodpecker in its name, it's in the ovenbird family. The olive-backed woodcreeper is a medium-sized bird that inhabits the middle elevations of the Andes Mountains and prefers humid forests. The Tyrrhenine woodcreeper is one of the larger and heavier woodcreepers, which is mostly commonly found in Ecuador between 5,900 and 8,900 feet. The pearl tree runner is only about 6 inches long and is found only along the Andes Mountains, especially areas with lots of moss and epiphytes. The streak-capped tree runner has what is known as a disjointed range with small locations in Venezuela, Colombia, and northern Ecuador. It is one of the larger tree runners, coming in at almost 9 inches. Streaked xenops are also in the ovenbird family and is quite small, barely 5 inches. Their range is extensive, going from the Andes Mountains down through most of southern Brazil. The stout-billed Cyclodes does not really look or act like other ovenbirds. It prefers to be high up in the paramo, above the tree line between 10,500 and 14,800 feet, and can even reach the snow line at 17,000 feet. The chestnut-winged Cyclodes is also a very high-altitude bird and has a much finer bill than the stout-bills. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a better picture showing the bill. Even at about 6.5 inches, the many-striped canastero is a large canastero. Again, this is a high-elevation bird, described as oftenly sneaky and likely to remain hidden. This one cooperatively popped out long enough for me to get this nice picture. The Azara's spinetail, the last of our ovenbirds, is about 6 inches long and is not sexually dimorphic. They tend to feed close to or on the ground, usually less than 7 feet high. In Ecuador, it can be found as low as 3,000 feet and up to 5,000 feet. Next, the birds with ants in their name. The great ant shrike is the only bird in its genus. The male is black and white. They're found close to the ground, no higher than 15 feet, and like dense vegetation. I was lucky. She hopped out into the opening for me to take a picture. The rufous ant thrush prefers wet forests, ravines, steep slopes, and other densely vegetated areas. It is almost always on the ground. The equatorial ant pitta is the most widely distributed of the ant pittas. Like other ant pittas, it prefers the floor and understory of humid montane forests with lots of moss and epiphytes. Chestnut-winged ant pittas act just like every other ant pitta and are very hard to find without help. They are often found near bamboo. The rufous ant pitta is actually a complex of ant pittas, which at one time had as many as 16 subspecies. They keep changing it, and now it appears to be one of 6 subspecies, although not all are recognized by all organizations. This one is in constant flux as to where it belongs. The tawny ant pitta has 3 subspecies, but in 2023, they split it into 3 separate species. Whether this is a western or a northern, I cannot say. It definitely isn't a southern. Not that it matters yet, the AOU doesn't recognize it. The giant antpitta is the largest antpitta, coming in at about 10 inches, where the others are about 6 to 7 inch range. This is also a rare bird with a very limited habitat, mostly in Ecuador, with a small section in Colombia. This bird is considered threatened due to habitat loss from logging, and Hokotoko is trying to preserve locations for this species. The streak-headed antbird is a small 6-inch bird that has a disjuncted distribution with populations in the western Andes in Colombia, both sides of the Andes in Ecuador, and the eastern slopes of the Andes in Peru. It forages between 3 and 50 feet from the ground, lunging from a perch to catch insects and spiders. Now the secret's out how we got so many antbirds. In La Paz, the owner's son takes the group from place to place, calling the birds by name. Here, Maria, come and get your food, whistling and making noises like food dropping. When he hears them coming closer, he puts mealworms out on logs or other natural-looking stations and let the photography begin. This is really the only way to see these birds. The other ochre-breasted antpitta is tiny, only 4 inches long. There are 4 subspecies of this bird. The chestnut-crowned antpitta inhabits a fairly wide variety of landscapes, usually associated with bamboo, but appears to be comfortable with human-modified areas like pastures. The large flycatcher family is next, the very common in Central and South America tropical kingbird. The common toady flycatcher with its oversized bill for its small size of about 3 3/4 inches. They have a large range. I've seen them in Central America, but for Ecuador, they're considered locally common to rare. The ornate flycatcher is cute with the markings on the head. They are common in Ecuador and prefer very humid cloud forests, particularly along streams. The dusky cap flycatcher is about 6.5 inches long and widespread in Ecuador. They feed in typical flycatcher fashion, perching on a sunny spot, then sallying out to catch an insect. As its name suggests, the Choco tyrannulet is found only in the Choco region of the Ecuador and Colombia. It is only about 4.5 inches long. As this picture shows, it likes to perch horizontally with its tail cocked. The golden-faced tyrannulet looks very similar to the Choco. The yellow around the eyes and the location in Napo helps determine the difference. This 5-inch bird, the streak-necked flycatcher, is uncommon in Ecuador and does not follow the flycatcher mold. Instead of insects, it tends to eat fruit berries and small fruits. The yellow-bellied Eleni is fairly variable in appearance. It is considered locally common to rare in Ecuador and is usually in groups foraging for berries and insects. They're having difficulty with the name of this bird. Some sources call it the slaty-backed chat tyrant, others the chestnut-bellied chat tyrant. Either is a descriptive name. This bird prefers heavily degraded former forests. The rufous-breasted chat tyrant looks similar to the chestnut-bellied, but has white on the stomach and a larger white line above the eye. They are usually found near streams. The rufous-breasted flycatcher is a small 5.25-inch bird that is considered uncommon in Ecuador. They are highly frugivorous, especially during the non-breeding season. The white-banded tyrannulet is aptly named for those bold wing bars. This photo shows how it prefers to perch horizontally, leaning forward before sallying out to glean an insect off the foliage. Not the greatest picture, but this lemon-browed flycatcher was very uncooperative. Since this bird is considered rare in Ecuador, I'm happy to just get this picture. The cinnamon flycatcher is quite plain from the front, but from the side, much more interesting. They are known for perching upright on horizontal twigs and prefer borders and clearings along wet montane forests. The pale-edged flycatcher species is notoriously difficult to identify. They look so similar to so many other flycatchers. Slightly upright but not vertical posture is typical. So you see what I mean? The golden belly flycatcher has a slightly darker cap and cheek. Tricky, isn't it? Hopefully, Merlin is correct in their identification. This little cutie, the marble-faced bristle tyrant, is called marbled because of the markings on its face. It tends to perch upright, then sally out to hover glean insects from leaves. Much easier, one from home, the olive-sided flycatcher with its stripy vest. The torrent tyrannulet is found near fast-moving streams, hence the name. Tyrannulet comes from the root tyrant. Why they call so many of these tiny birds tyrants, I don't know. It's probably similar to why some flycatchers are called kingbirds. Not the greatest picture, but you can probably see where it gets the name rufous-headed pygmy tyrant. The pygmy portion comes from its size, barely 4 inches. The last flycatcher picture is the piratic flycatcher, which was way off in the distance, so this was the best I could do. The cock of the rock is one of the cotingas. We had to get up early to get to the hide before sunup to wait for the cock of the rocks. There were 3 males in pretty dark conditions. They did their pig noises trying to impress the female, but she never showed up. Oddly, the day before this, while we were driving down the road, a female did shoot by. She is all cinnamon colored. Oh, those darn cotingas. Very hard to photograph, either in dark conditions or miles away. Not so hot for my only Quetzal. When these Amazonian umbrella birds flew in, Jorge got excited and kept hollering for the other group to hurry, come say it. 2 people got there just as it flew away, but we had good, albeit distant looks. Note the odd wattle hanging down from its neck. Cotingas are really strange-looking birds. This was probably the best shot, but you can't really see the wattle very well. The white eye makes this a male. Too bad he didn't lift his crest. It goes up and hangs over his head like an umbrella. This barred Bacard was the only Bacard I got a picture of. It is in the same family as a titris, and we did get a couple of mass titras, but only as a distance and no good pictures. That brings us to the vireos, pepper shrikes, and greenlet family. The brown-capped vireo was the only vireo I got a picture of. It is about 5 inches and likes second growth areas. The red eyebrow and whitish chest makes the black-billed pepper shrike distinctive. They are usually hard to see, but I was lucky to get this good of a picture. I have one of the whole body, but not focused well enough. This handsome fellow is the green jay, one of the 6 jays in Ecuador, and the prettiest of the ones we did see. They are typical jays, noisy and conspicuous. The turquoise jay is much plainer, basically only 2 colors of various tones, but still a very pretty bird. Another jay we saw was the violaceous jay, not quite as close and not quite as brightly colored as the green, but still very noisy. We had 4 of the 13 types of swallows found in Ecuador, but I only got pictures of 2. This picture of the brown belly came out pretty good. The picture of the far more common blue and white swallow did not. They were just too fast for me. This southern house wren looks like and sounds similar to our house wren, but it is different. Apparently, our house wren doesn't go this far south when it migrates. We had 5 types of wren, but generally they were uncooperative, skulking around. I was able to get 1 decent picture of a mountain wren. Dippers are in a class of their own. This white-capped dipper was cooperative, giving us lots of really good looks, jumping in and out of the water feeding. Thrushes come next, and they have quite a few plain-looking thrushes, the great thrush being the largest and is distinctive with its yellow-orange bill and feet, and is very common. The Ecuadorian thrush is a little plainer, and the bills and feet are not nearly as colorful, only found in 2 locations that we visited. Apparently, they're much more common closer to the Pacific Ocean. The app lists 116 tanagers and their allies, including honey creepers and flower piercers, like this glossy flower piercer. The masked flower piercer on the right was a fairly common sighting for us. The black-eared hemispingus was a much harder bird to find. We saw it once. The app says it's rare and local in most of its range and often overlooked. This one cooperated by pulling this moth off of a white screen. Isn't the golden-collared wood honeycreeper a pretty bird? There are two subspecies, one on the west side and one on the east. This is the eastern bird. It is much blacker head than the western bird. The female is not nearly as colorful, but still very interesting, albeit muted colors. They really enjoyed this banana feeder. Another hemispingus, this one, the blackcap, looking over his shoulder at me. They're usually found in the cloud forest, but sometimes can be found as high as the paramo. How these birds like this green honeycreeper get this vibrant color is beyond me. So brilliant, but not exactly what I would call green. So the female is the one who really brings the green to the green honeycreeper's name. The golden-breasted fruit eater gave me a merry chase until I was able to get this shot in the fog. You wouldn't think bananaquit would be in the tanager family, but it is. It looks totally different from the rest of the family with that thin, curvy bill. How different the shape of the bill of the cinereous conebill is when compared to the bananaquit. Their bill is short and pointy, where the bananaquit's bill is long and curved. This is a bird that ranges from the temperate forest to the paramo, but especially prefers areas with stunted shrubs. Skulking in the plants was this oleaginous hemispingus, pulling some critter out of a leaf. We were able to see 5 of the 7 hemispinguses in Ecuador, despite their being very skulky. The black flower piercer was a typical hook and bill of the flower piercer group. They used the bill to pierce the bottoms of the flowers to get to the nectar without gathering any pollen. Now we get to the part of the tanager group that has tanager in their names. Most are real beauties, like this scarlet-bellied mountain tanager. This is a blue-capped tanager. This one is sometimes called blue-headed tanager, but you'll see a much better candidate for that name later. Like all tanagers, they eat fruit. Therefore, any feeder that had bananas had tanagers. Here, the black-chested mountain tanager. They are listed as rare to locally uncommon, so these feeders are godsends. This sloppy eater with food on his bill is the hooded mountain tanager. It looks similar to the black-chested, but the black doesn't go down as far and has a red, not dark brown eye. The golden-naped tanager, named for the golden patch on the back of its neck. This may be a female. The golden patch on her nape is not as big or brilliant as that shown for the males. Probably the plainest of all the tanagers, the palm tanager, a study in gray with a tiny bit of greenish yellow wash on the head. A trio of very pretty golden tanagers. I can't tell you if these are all males or females. Basically, they look the same, even the juvenile. They are just like this, except for an extra black line on some of the subspecies. The male flame rump tanager is black with a bright yellow rump and was formerly called lemon rump tanager, but it was lumped with the flame rump, which has a redder rump and was the Colombian version of this species. Some tanagers, like the flame rumps, are sexually dimorphic. Some are not. Obviously, the female flame rump looks completely different from the male. In the Colombian version, there's a lot more reds and oranges on her flanks. A dusky-faced tanager. Often the tanager names make sense. This name definitely works for describing this bird. Thanks to the feeders, we got good looks at this bird, which the app says are difficult to see. The rufous-throated tanager, again, a good description of the obviously identifying mark. This is a small but distinct tanager with a rufous throat and spotted breast. Quite lovely. Speaking of lovely, the glistening green tanager. Wow, what a green. Obviously well named. The female is maybe slightly duller, but tough to determine. And the juvenile lacks the red and white spot. The flame-faced tanager is not sexually dimorphic, but it does have another subspecies with a reddish face, which makes the name more sensible. On this gray and gold tanager, you may ask, where's the gold? Here. But this bird must not be in breeding plumage. It is supposed to have a thick, very yellow band here on its chest. Silver-throated tanager, another no-brainer for the name. Males and females look alike, and the juveniles are only slightly duller. The blue-gray tanager is a very common bird in Central America, but less so in Ecuador. It is only found in the mountains of Ecuador. This is either a female or juvenile emerald tanager. The male is even brighter, if you can imagine that. It is hard to get one's head around the colors of these tanagers. How about this one? The bay-headed tanager is stunning. So many colors. There are several subspecies with variations on this theme. Juveniles lack the bay-colored head. The mossback tanager is named for the moss-colored patch on the back. Kind of muted looking at first until you start to notice all of the subtle color changes. This is a male swallow tanager. It's called a swallow tanager because it tends to fly like a swallow or a swift. Its white belly barely shows in this picture. The female is more greenish and unfortunately looking away from me. A lucky shot of the fawn-breasted tanager, the only good picture I got of this bird. You can just see the fawn-colored breast. This bird was in the abandoned lot near Bindo. Golden hooded tanager. There's so many types of tanagers. It must have been challenging to come up with so many descriptive names. The gold on this bird is muted for some reason, maybe not in breeding plumage. The male white-line tanagers are black with a white line. His name makes sense. It's a fairly large and common tanager. The female white-line tanager is just a plain brown, so the name doesn't really fit to her. It's hard to see, but she's carrying a very large caterpillar of some sort. Blue-necked tanager. You would think this bird would be what they would call a blue-headed tanager, but I guess the name was temporarily taken when they named this bird. It looks to me that a whole lot more than just its neck is blue on this bird. Black-chinned mountain tanager. Mountain tanagers tend to be high-altitude birds. On this picture, you can barely see the yellow cap, a large yellow cap on its head. They tend to sit upright when resting. We were lucky to get the red-hooded tanager. Jorge heard it and called it in. It is a bird that most guides rarely see. Some of them have never seen it. The female is similar, but her hood only comes down to the chin. Blue and black tanager, probably a male. The female looks the same, but is slightly duller. Lachrymose mountain tanager. Lacrimosa is a Latin word for tearful. So this one is named for the yellow teardrop below the eye. Isn't nature wonderful to create beauties like this beryl-spangled tanager? What a crazy quilt of a bird in two colors. Buff-breasted mountain tanager is a high-altitude resident, named by the thin, buffy area on the upper breast. The tanager family is so full of beautiful birds like this golden-eared tanager, such stunning colors. It is mind-boggling to try to sort them out and to remember them all. Finding different ways to say yellow leads to saffron crown tanager. I caught this one just as it was coming in for a landing. Considering blue in birds is not a true color, but a reflection of the light, it is amazing how many shades of blue are in the black-capped tanager. Can you believe the spotted tanager? Such a fascinating looking bird. So many subtle colors and patterns, and you cannot even see the yellow undertail coverts. The male silverbeak tanager is black with a red neck and silver beak. A larger bird, but I still had trouble getting a picture. This black and white beauty, the magpie tanager, is the last of my good tanager pictures. So obviously, the prettiest birds are past us. Well, maybe not. The male golden grosbeak is pretty colorful. Obviously, the app I use is somewhat out of date. They call this bird the golden-bellied grosbeak. The following species are all in the Cardinalidae family. Even the female is interesting. None of the apps say anything about what they eat, but it's probably hard nuts or seeds with that massive bill. The black-winged saltator is a fairly large bird, about 8 inches long. It would be easier if they'd stop moving birds around. Traditionally, saltators and grosbeaks are in the Cardinalidae family, but Wikipedia says saltators have been moved to the tanager family. Stop already. This is getting confusing. According to Sibley, who's the Bible I use, grosbeaks and saltators like this buff-throated saltator are in the Cardinalidae family, as are our scarlet and summer tanagers. So here's the male summer tanager that we saw, and then a female summer tanager. You don't get them this close at home. Now the sparrows and finches. The most common bird for the whole trip was the rufous-collared sparrow. It was everywhere, from low elevations to high, from forest to city. Pretty colorful for a sparrow. As is this yellow-breasted brushfinch. They are usually found close to the ground at the edges of scrubby areas. As is typical of the brushfinches, the gray-browed brushfinch are found close to the ground. To make life difficult, someone has changed the name of some of these birds since the app was published. It used to be the striped-headed brushfinch. Can't they just leave well enough alone already? The black-striped sparrow is appropriately named, with obvious black stripes on its head. The white-winged brushfinch gets its name from the white pocket handkerchief on its wing. Doesn't this look like the previous picture? But it is different. The cap is brighter. The bird was located in Napo, where the white-winged brushfinch is not found, making this the chestnut-capped brushfinch. You can just barely see the pale nape on this bird that gives the pale nape brushfinch its name. The male thick-billed Aphonia, of whom I did not get a good picture, is dark blue above, yellow below, with a large yellow headlight on its forehead. The female orange-bellied Euphonia looks a lot like the thick-billed, but not as dark. The orange-bellied male looks a lot like the thick-billed male, but with a more extensive yellow cap and white spots on the tail. Finally, a nice plain bird, the yellow-bellied seed eater. How the camera focused on this bird, I don't know, but I'm glad it did. The variable seed eater is called variable because the amount of black and white varies extremely on this type of bird, on this bird. Now, the darn Chlorospingus family. They were formerly known as bush tanagers, but were changed because they're now in the sparrow family, not the tanager family. They're very drab and difficult to ID. This one is a dusky Chlorospingus. This one could be a dusky, but the small white dot behind the eye seems to indicate this may be a young common Chlorospingus, which will eventually develop a larger white patch behind the eye. Red crested finches are easier. It has a red crest. That being said, on pictures I took with the crest down, Merlin kept wanting to call this a hepatic tanager. Sometimes Merlin can be way off. Warblers are surprisingly scarce. This is a buffy rump warbler, some sort of plain compared to most of our warblers. I guess closest to our worm-eating warbler. The russet-crowned warbler are very hard to photograph, always in dark conditions, usually under the white screen. Fortunately, topaz can make this shot tolerable. Speckled redstart with his pretty yellow spectacles was another of the scarce warblers. We did get some of ours. One of ours we got was the Canada warbler. We also had Blackburnians and American redstart, but I didn't try hard to get pictures of them. Blackbird families finishes off the list with a color drought. Here, the giant cowbird, which was about crow size. The scrub blackbird. With blackbirds, you have to identify them mostly by size and eye color. The scrub is medium size and has a dark eye. Well, some of the blackbird family, like this red-breasted meadowlark, do have color. And since Orioles are technically in the blackbird family and pendulas are in the Oriole family, here's another colorful blackbird, the russet-backed pendula. The scarlet-rumped cacique hides its color behind on its rump, under its wing, but it does have pretty blue eyes. Our last sighting isn't a bird, but a spectacled bear. We saw it as we were leaving the Paramo on our way to the airport in Quito. Jorge was very excited. They were very hard to find. Here's a map of the eBird checklist for the list. You can see we didn't get all that far from Quito, and we're mostly in the mountains. My final wrap up, total checklist, 25. Total species for me, 307. Species with photos, 280. Life birds for me, 262. Life photos for me, 246. Giving me a percentage life birds with pictures of 94. Total world life species for me, 353. Total world life photos for me, 1,258. Percentage world life pictures, birds with pictures, 93%. I want to thank Dorothy Bedford for all the efforts she made to make this trip possible and to make next year's trip possible. I couldn't do it without her. Jorge took this video of the spectacled bear since we were very rarely seen him. But I suppose by now you are probably feeling a lot like this guy and are ready to get out of here. So the end.